Thanksgiving. We think we know this holiday's origin: pilgrims, Mayflowers, and a friendly feast with Native Americans. But how much of that story is true? And what does Thanksgiving really mean when we uncover the history behind the myth? Let's rewind. In 1621, the survivors of the Mayflower, just 50 or so pilgrims, had scraped through their first brutal year in New England. Starvation and cold had nearly wiped them out. They struggled. Then, thanks to help from Wampanoag leader Squanto and his people, the pilgrims learned to plant corn and fish the bay. By autumn, they had a successful harvest for the first time. Governor William Bradford declared a 3-day harvest feast to celebrate this unlikely success, inviting the Wampanoag neighbours to join them. This is the event often called the First Thanksgiving, the 1621 meal where colonists and Wampanoag gathered in relative peace. It was a genuine moment of cooperation. But even the survivors knew it would be one small chapter in a much larger story. Because after 1621, things changed. The Wampanoag people and other tribes soon faced endless waves of settlers. By 1637 and 1675, peace turned to war. King Philip's War devastated New England. Many native communities were broken apart, sold into slavery, or killed. The simple story of friendly feasting was being swept aside by a darker reality. So why do we celebrate a myth of harmony? In reality, the 1621 event was one isolated episode of peace, and certainly not repeated every year. In fact, historians note that similar Thanksgiving celebrations occurred at different times. Some Spanish settlers held a Thanksgiving in Florida back in 1565. George Washington held one in 1789 after the Revolutionary War. But those were political proclamations, not lasting traditions. The Thanksgiving holiday we know didn't come about until much later. In the mid-1800s, writer Sarah Josepha Hale campaigned for years to make Thanksgiving a national day of gratitude. She sent letters to 5 US presidents arguing for a holiday to bring families together. Finally, in 1863, President Abraham Lincoln, in the midst of a brutal civil war, declared the last Thursday of November a national Thanksgiving. He hoped it would unite a divided nation. Ever since, Americans have gathered in November to eat turkey and give thanks, albeit often without acknowledging the full story of earlier centuries. What have we learned? That the common tale, pilgrims and Native Americans enjoying a joyful feast every November, is a mix of myth and moments of truth. The 1621 harvest meal did happen, but it was an exception rather than the rule. For many Native Americans, Thanksgiving is a reminder not just of gratitude, but of loss and survival. In fact, some communities today observe it as a national day of mourning, honouring ancestors who suffered after those early encounters. So where does that leave us? Even if the origin story was rosier than reality, Thanksgiving can still be meaningful. Perhaps it's a chance to ask why we gather. Is it simply habit, or is there a deeper intention? We can choose to remember the whole history, the hardship, the help, the conflicts, and be thankful not only for our own blessings, but for understanding the past. By doing so, we honour all parts of the story: the hopes of the pilgrims, the knowledge of the native people, and the resilience of those who came after. Thanksgiving is not just a day on the calendar, it's a story we tell each year. When we learn the true origin, we discover that history is more complex than a postcard. And maybe that's reason enough to give thanks, for the courage to ask questions, and the wisdom to learn from all of our history,